Ever since the dawn of history, humanity competed over resources. Humans wanted what others have, whether it's food, building blocks, energy, whatever that is. And that always led to violence. And that violence created a very unpleasant existence, a very stagnant society. And in order for the society to coexist and to progress and to prosper, humanity always created a system. And that system put in place some rules to prevent people to steal, rob, and murder. And that system created prosperity and progress. But eventually, it also created empires. And those empires created war. In the early days, if you go back, we started off with the basic system where religion was the first morality code that was introduced for humans to not steal, to not rob, to not murder each other. But the existence of this morality code created societies that prospered, that progressed. Empires were created based on these religious codes. But eventually those empires went to war. We had the Crusades starting from the 11th century for a few centuries down the road. And that collapse leads to Humanity 2.0, the next system that was introduced in the 17th century. An experiment that's based on the separation of religion. Church and state are separate. We just saw religion is not good. We saw what happened with the Crusades. So let's cut the religion out of the state. So now our morality code is based on the social contract between humans, between civilians, and the state in which they live. It's the Leviathan by John Hobbes, right? Every single civilian gives up his own absolute freedom to do whatever they want. Steal, rob, whatever. So we give our own liberties to the Leviathan in exchange for the promise, the social contract that everybody else does the same, and the country, the state, will punish whoever strays from this code. So this morality code was based on a social contract between the state and the civilian. That worked. That worked amazing. Empires get created again. And those empires went to war in 1914, World War I. Britain, France, Germany, Russia, Italy, Austria-Hungary, we had all these empires fighting over expansionism, over colonization. And that led, of course, to an arms race. And that led to a creation of axis, of alliances. We had Britain and France and Russia on the one hand, Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary on the other hand. Eventually, war happens. Eventually, Germany gets humiliated. Eventually, the winners take everything, and Germany goes into a deep depression. And that led to the rise of very negative forces in Germany, which led to the 1939 World War II. Germany lashed out mainly against Europe, trying to reclaim respect, trying to reclaim resources, trying to reclaim a seat at the table, and basically went to war with Europe. Germany, of course, lost that war eventually in 1945. We all know how World War II ended, but that led to a reset. Version 3 of humanity was introduced in 1945, right after the end of World War II. And the idea was very simple. On the one hand, bring up the losers. They looked at how they handled post-World War I, how they've kicked Germany to the curb, and said, hold on, that didn't work. Why don't we bring up everybody who lost in this war? Germany, Japan. We bring them up. We give them all the resources they need. We give them all the money they need. We make them prosperous so they don't feel like they've lost the war. So they don't feel they have to lash out like Germany lashed out after losing World War I. We'll give them everything they need. And if that's the approach, let's just give everybody what they need. Let's make resources plentiful for everybody so that nobody ever has to go to war for resources. Let's create a global trading system where everybody has access to every single resource on the planet at any given moment at a reasonable price, so that wars over resources never happen again. And that was probably one of the most exciting experiments over the course of humanity. The past 80 years were fascinating. This system worked for the past 80 years phenomenally. We have Germany and Japan going through massive economic booms with the help from the winners of World War II. And we had a whole global trading system that was created in 1945. Think about it. When was the United Nations created? 1945. When was the International Monetary Fund was created? That was supposed to support the weak countries, the third world countries. 1945. When was the World Health Organization created? 1948. NATO, 1949. So a system was created. Version 3 of humanity post-World War II was give everybody access to resources at all time, give everybody money so that everybody thrives, keep the shipping lanes open so that goods and resources can move freely, keep prices normal so nobody gets overpriced, and fund the weaker countries so they can survive. And this global trading system, this globalization system, was managed by the United States. Now, obviously, not everybody was on board with this. For example, the USSR did not play ball with the system. They've had their own little thing going on. But with the rest of the world going along with this, with the exception of USSR and some of its proxies, at the end, the USSR collapsed. Since 1970 to 1990, the United States watched as the USSR went through a systematic slow death because they wouldn't play ball with this globalization trading system. Until eventually in 1990, the USSR fell apart. Centralized economy, closed markets, that didn't fit the new global order. In 1990, the only challenger was gone. The USSR fell apart. And ever since then, for the past 30 years, we have lived in the best time for the system, where the United States was not challenged and managed this global system, and it kind of worked. It wasn't perfect, but it worked until it stopped working. And this is where we are right now. Now, this system is dying. We're heading to the end of humanity 3.0. The global trading system, resources for everybody, globalization, this is all dying. And it will be replaced by a new system, but not before a major world war happens. It always happens. It wasn't always called the World War. The Crusades were not called the World War, right? But Crusades, World War I, World War II, we're heading to massive regional military conflicts to decide who gets to write the new rules for the new system that happens. But before I talk about that, why is the system collapsing? I mean, what happened that killed the system? Well, you see, the way the system stays in place and stays intact is that everybody agrees to this idea that nobody gets to have too many resources. Everybody shares. Everybody makes money. Now, if you happen to have more resources than others, Saudi Arabia has more energy, sure, you'll make way more money. But everybody shares. Nobody takes ownership of resources, and nobody blocks the global trading that allows everybody to have access until somebody breaks the rules, which is exactly what happened with Ukraine. What the USSR failed to do in the 70s and 80s, Russia of 2023 did by invading Ukraine. Because you see, when Russia invaded Ukraine, it did a few things. Number one, obviously, it weaponized energy against Europe, mainly against Germany. You see, Germany completely gave up on its domestic energy system because they had a great deal with Russia for gas. That gas was cheap, it was plentiful, it was accessible. There was no need for any domestic production of energy. Until Putin decided to weaponize the access to this gas in order to push Germany in the right political way. Now, obviously, that didn't really work to Putin's advantage as much as he hoped, but that's a topic for a different video. But the usage of supply of resources and important resources such as energy, maybe the most important of them all, that broke the system. Not to mention that the whole idea of why Putin actually invaded eastern Ukraine, it wasn't really to protect Russians. Come on. It wasn't really because he was fearful of NATO on his borders. I mean, look, NATO definitely annoys the hell out of Putin, but that wasn't the real reason for the invasion. The real reason for the invasion was the fact that the eastern part of Ukraine, the one that Putin invaded to, has everything. It has the wheat. It has the industrial complex. The coal production industry is in Donetsk. The minute Putin took another country's supplies, the food, the coal, the industry, and he basically took it to himself and said, look, I decide who gets some of this. because 80% of the Middle East gets their wheat from Ukraine. Now I get to decide who gets it, who's not. That started a whole race. Every single country out there is now trying to figure out how they can secure enough supplies, enough resources for themselves, because they no longer trust this global supply globalization system. It's dead. And that death leads to wars, because now we're talking about a whole new war brewing. Ukraine is one war. It's being fought as we speak. And the other war is now starting in the Middle East. The empires create axis, just like it happened many, many times before. And now there's an arm race. There's competition. There's proxy wars. There's clashes. The Middle East is the next battleground, the next competition between these axes. US, EU, the Gulf countries versus China, Iran, and Russia. So the Middle East right now is completely dominated by Iran. While the United States was asleep at the wheel over the past few administrations, Iran took control of Yemen, it took control of Syria completely, and it took control of Iraq to an extent. Now, the US still has major influence in Egypt, Jordan, for whatever that's worth, and a complete dominance over the decision-making of Israel. So, a very strong allies in the region, but now Iran is starting to compete with that. And as a way to counter that, the United States starts to make their own moves in the region. In September, the United States announces the creation of a new economic corridor. US, Europe, Israel, Saudi Arabia, India. That's designed to cut out the Iranians and also the Russians, and some, the Chinese, out of the Indian trade. Now, in October, Iran attacks Israel by the use of one of the proxies, which is Hamas. And obviously, right after that, around November, Israel strikes Hamas, it strikes Gaza, it goes to war. That creates a stain, a taint on Israel and its ability to cooperate with Saudi Arabia. But it doesn't really fully work because the Saudis still very much interested in working with Israel because the interests just align. In December, Iran goes for another move. That didn't fully work, so Iran blocks off the Suez Canal with the other proxy, the Houthi rebels, and hurts the second ally of the United States in the region, which is Egypt. Now, the United States retaliates by creating a naval coalition. It opens up the Suez Canal. Maersk and other companies have now agreed to go through the Suez Canal, so now the Suez Canal is open. So the Israelis are cleaning up the first proxy, the Hamas, and they'll take over Gaza. The US naval coalition, with the participation of the Saudis, is opening up the Suez Canal. The moves so far have been in the initiative side, on the side of Iran, but the reaction from the US side and from the axis of the US, the Israelis, the Saudis, the reactions were quite smart. And the latest move, in which the Israelis took out one of the heads of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in Syria, Raza Mousavi, was another little chink in that Iranian armor. Now, I've posted a detailed article about that specific operation, what this means for the entire region, and how this means we're setting up for a huge battle. This article about the assassination of Raza Mousavi is actually on our Patreon, patreon.com/Tom Nash Report. But I'll just give you kind of the highlights. So Raza Mousavi is basically chilling in Syria. Now, the reason he's chilling in Syria because he's located in a part of Syria that is completely Iranian dominated. It's a Shiite base. It's an extremely religious place. They have a mosque over there that's named on the name of the granddaughter of the Prophet Muhammad, Zainab. So it's a Shiite stronghold. It's an Iranian hub for all the weapons that's coming in from Iran to Syria and to Lebanon. It's the backyard of the Iranians in Syria. It's the heart of them. It's extremely densely populated, and it's surrounded by mosques and religious sites. And all of a sudden, the Israelis take him out with a precision airstrike, one that requires insane intelligence, insane operational capabilities. This wasn't done because the Israelis didn't like this guy, who, by the way, was the best friend of Qasem Soleimani, and now he joined them in the room temperature test. But the idea here is very simple. Look, when the Israelis made that strike, it showed, because of the dense population, the proximity to the mosques, the precision, It showed the neighbors that are thinking about flipping on Israel, basically telling them, look, our intelligence is way better than you thought because of October 7th. Our operation capabilities away from home is way better than you thought. Do not screw with us. Now, the other message here was for Iran specifically, basically telling Iran, look, two things you need to understand, Iran. Number one, if you're going to use proxies, we're going to hurt you directly. And we can get to you anywhere. You're not safe in your backyard. You're not safe in Iran. We got the intelligence and the capability and the approval of the US to strike you anywhere. You're not safe. And number three, it was a message to the Saudis. The whole idea of the coalition of Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the US is based on the ability of the Israelis to be a protector of Saudis in the region. The Israeli military might is a precondition for the alliance with the Saudis. This was basically to the Saudis telling them, look, we're way better than people think after October 7th. Yeah, we got embarrassed, but we can do a lot of damage and we can be very precise and we have intel. So you can count on us. So yes, Egypt now open, the Suez Canal is open, Iran was embarrassed. Yes, it's a few W's, a few wins for the US side, but there's still a long war ahead and it's brewing up to be a serious regional war. We have the Houthi problem in Yemen, still not solved. We have a possible war in Lebanon between Israel and Hezbollah, which is going to be a massive war. We have Iran chasing a nuclear bomb, which will have to be addressed by the Israelis or the United States or both. We have the Turkish, who are a complete wild card in this. Yes, they're NATO members, but this recent rhetoric calling Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel a Nazi state, I mean, they're going to be a massive wild card and they have a huge army. Well, their economy is not so hot and they have so much other problems globally, so not sure they want to get involved in this mess. There's a war in Ukraine still going on. So one thing is for certain, we're headed into a massive regional conflict, potentially World War III, and things will never be the same. Look, there's a thing right here that I put up. That's a subscribe button if you haven't subscribed to the channel. And right here, I'm going to put a video which is titled, "The War Between Iran and Israel is Inevitable." This video right here, you should definitely check out. I'll see that video in just a second.